Thank you for your patience, everyone. Unfortunately, we've had a technical hitch. Our next speaker, Dr. Pauline McClellan, has been unable to join us due to technical difficulties. Tiny Life joined with LifeStart to deliver the Tiny Start program. So in the absence of Pauline, I am going to deliver her presentation and hopefully do justice to the program and what was achieved during the Tiny Start program. So Bev, if you would like to share the presentation, I will take delegates through it. Thank you. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the partnership approach which came from Tiny Life, LifeStart and the delivery of the Tiny Start program, and why working in partnership with parents of preterm infants can improve outcomes. Next slide. So Tiny Start was Northern Ireland's first holistic programme of support and child development specifically tailored for families of premature babies up to the age of 3. It was a partnership project that Tiny Life and LifeStart, two major family support organisations, each with 25 years plus experience supporting families with children under the age of 5, came together to design this unique programme to support a very particular cohort of children who needed to benefit from support with their developmental outcomes. The overall project was evaluated by the School of Nursing and Midwifery at Queen's University, and you will hear from Dr. Fiona Lynn shortly with regards to the outcomes and achievements of the project. Next slide, please. So what were the two partners' missions and what did they actually do? It was to achieve positive outcomes for Tiny Life. It was to achieve positive outcomes for premature and unwell babies aged pre-birth to age 2 and promote a tailored practical educational support for families by building parents' confidence, knowledge, skills, and giving their baby to help them to give their baby a better start in life, a better chance of achieving their developmental outcomes. For LifeStart, it was to produce a better child development outcomes, making available to parents an evidence-based knowledge and information program on how their children learn and develop, and supporting parents to use this information to promote good nurturing and provide a good home learning environment. Next slide. So the program origins form back to work that Tiny Life did with parents. They had engaged in a number of workshops and consultations with parents over a period of time and asked parents what did they need. And two of the key things from that feedback were the lack of services which were appropriate to their and their infants' needs. Many of our parents did not access universal services and felt that there was a gap missing in the support that they had at that time. There was limited support to them when their child leaves hospital. And as we've seen from Dr. Siraj's presentation and from the questions, many of those parents became anxious going back when they were accessing their GP and school. So why working in partnership with parents is important. Next slide, please. The first months and years of life matter most, and we know that, and we're going to explore that in some detail in a moment. Next slide, please, Beth. Two of the most important variables in child development are the parent-child relationship. The cycle of bonding and attachment forms the basis for the child in their early life and how they go forward into their adult life. The child sends out a message, and how the parent responds to that and meets the child's needs is very important. And the importance of a home-based learning environment is crucial when we look at how a child learns, develops, and moves forward throughout their life and their achievements in future life. Next slide, please. So why working in partnership with parents? Why do we do that? What do we hope to achieve? The development period in the first few months and years of life is crucial to a child's capacity to develop, learn, and about their future health and well-being. The home is the primary environment for development and early learning and the most immediate focus for good nurture. Early life relationships set the foundation for future learning and development. And of course, good attachment and a loving adult bond with an infant are crucial to the physical, psychological, cognitive, and emotional and social development of our children. Next slide, please. Also, it creates positive effects to serve and return intimacy, and confirmed by neuroscience. Parents are the children's primary educators and have the most important influence on the child's developmental outcomes. A good home environment is a predictor of a good educational outcomes. Learning within a family determines how the child will view itself, how they handle their interpersonal relationships, how they handle their social relationships, and how they will engage with the world as a whole. Parents have intimate and personal knowledge of their child, particularly of a premature child, and they can help identify their child's developmental outcomes. They are the gatekeepers, often for their child's health, particularly when there are a number of other therapists and a number of other doctors, etc., involved as well. Next slide, please, Bev. So time spent in a neonatal unit may affect opportunities for that attachment and bonding. And if we think about those reasons why, where the parent, the mother, and maybe separated from their child at birth, but that limited access maybe to their neonatal unit for doing all the normal things that they expected during their pregnancy. Parents may have had a stillborn or several other miscarriages, which may impact on their bonding and attachment, as well as they become highly anxious around their child's health. We know that the mental health of parents, particularly parents of preterm children, is heightened with heightened levels of anxiety, worry, and concerns. We know that mothers of premature babies are 40% more likely to have PSTD, and this affects nurturing and supporting child development. The lack of parental confidence and self-efficacy is more heightened within parents of premature babies as well. Many of them often reporting that they did not feel like parents when their child was in the neonatal unit, often becoming institutionalized and relying on medical staff who are caring for their baby. There's a need to continue parental reassurance and support as the child grows and develops, not just within the NICU, but beyond. Insights into how our child develop and learn positively affect how we support parents as a people as well. Parents can be taught new parenting techniques that will support them both with their mental health and with their child's development as well. Next slide, please, Bev. So the aim of the project was to offer a unique and specialised wraparound programme of services based on the services that Tiny Life delivered. So those services are parent groups, peer-to-peer opportunities, baby massage, and one-to-one supports. And Tiny Life offered those services from birth to 2 years of age. LifeStart brought its unique, internationally recognised Growing Child programme and offered a home visiting service from birth to 3 years. Next slide. All families living within 3 trust areas that we were funded to deliver the programme were offered all of the services, and that was over 500 families per year at that point. We actually targeted a cohort of babies within that and families within that. So if a baby was born under 32 weeks gestation or had a birth rate of under 1,500 grams living within the areas, they were offered the Growing Child programme. Next slide, please. So what were the objectives of this programme? It was about making parents feel more confident, to have greater knowledge of their child's development, for greater parental efficacy, and a greater understanding of the importance of the parent-child interaction, attachment, and bonding. For babies, for those children born premature, we were looking to improve better developmental outcomes in terms of their physical, intellectual, emotional, and mental well-health, and improve those childhood resilience, language, and communication skills that we know from research being born prematurely and in a NICU and their gestational age can impact. We also looked at siblings, and it's interesting, and Dr. Siraj talked about siblings as well, because the whole family is affected by prematurity. So we try to enhance those relationships between siblings and increase their understanding of and be improved their own self and their own self-esteem. And within the wider community, we know that quite a number of our families become isolated. They do not engage in their community. So it was supporting parents through our parent support groups, our baby massage, etc., to enable parents to develop a peer-to-peer community within their wider community, thus feeling less isolated. Next slide, please. In terms of the implementation, 66 families participated in the Tiny Life services and the Growing Child programs, the wraparound program of both aspects. 39 of the 40 original families recruited received the Growing Child program for the first 3 years of their child's life. We had very low dropouts as parents. It met parents' needs about supporting their child and being able to feel that they could make a difference. A further 27 received the program, including the Growing Child program and the full services. 97.5% of the original families completed the program, and the project exceeded the original targets by 66%. Next slide, please. So participants completed and completion rates evidence the strong parental commitment to this program. Mothers, often when they were returning to work, continued with the program, facilitated by the family visitors' flexibility and their ability to deliver the program in different settings. Parents consistently carried out the activities recommended in the Growing Child program as demonstrated by the family visitors. So the family visitor, you will hear, goes in once a month, but they support the parents to incorporate many of those activities into their daily lives. Parents use books, toys, parenting and drawing materials and other resources very effectively to promote their child's development. Parents are also encouraged not to buy unnecessary toys and use ready available household objects to support the activities and their child's development. Parents successfully incorporated that learning, as we say, into their every day-to-day activities and routines. Next slide, please. Parents were enthusiastically reporting back on their child in terms of their responses and their progresses, which were documented from month to month. Parents were thrilled when their children reached their developmental milestones, many within that first year, the majority within the second year of the program delivery. They expressed overwhelming gratitude for their monthly guidance and the direction that they received in their own home and very much tailored to their child and their child's needs, because those visits overcame many of their worries and concerns, and these were alleviated during those conversations that took part in homes. It increased the parental knowledge and competency. It increased their confidence and their efficacy as well. And many of them utilised and have told us the skills that they learned through the Growing Child program with their premature baby, they've been able to share with their family, friends and other children who came later. Next slide, please, Bev. So it was very much a partnership approach based on the relationship equally between the parent and the staff who were involved. High level of staff commitment, working in partnership with parents was crucial to the success. A real key focus was on child development rather than instructing the parents. It was very much a conversational approach, which was child-centered. It was a structured conversation about supporting the parent to understand their developing child. It was a strengths-based approach focusing on the positives and addressing the problematic issues. Therefore, from month to month, if a child had not developed or moved along in the way that the parent had expected, the family visitor would take time to go over what was needed again and support the parent to look at what they had achieved before moving on to the next stage. Staff were very sensitive to the parents' needs and concerns, and it was very much that child development focus. Next slide, please. The crucial thing about the Growing Child program and why it worked very well with families of premature babies compared to other evidence-based programs was the flexible fidelity. This evidence program adapted its delivery to suit and tailor it to the needs of the child and at that particular point in time. The parent-child progress and feedback was reported in regular progress meetings involving staff from the organisations, both organisations working and supporting the families. The effective partnership across all of the project levels, including the implementation stages, the monitoring, the ongoing reporting and evaluation, allowed both organisations to look at the issues and problems that arose quickly and put in early interventions that supported the programme rolling forward. There was a high level of commitment among the parents and the staff of the project to achieve good outcomes for all the parents concerned. And when we see that 97.5% level of commitment on parents staying the full 3 years, that just shows the level that was required there. Next slide, please. As a result of the Tiny Life programme, we have now incorporated the Growing Child programme and the home visiting service into our normal menu of services. And I'm actually delighted to say that we've been able to expand it within the last few months with a grant from our Department of Education. So we have all of our staff, our family support staff are trained in the programme, and we have 5 new internal family visitors who will be rolling this out to over 120 families per year across Northern Ireland. We will continue with our franchise arrangement with LifeStart, and we will be delivering the service across Northern Ireland, as I say. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for bearing with us for this part of the presentation. I'm now going to invite Dr. Fiona Lynn to present the findings of the Tiny Start programme. As you will remember, the School of Nursing and Midwifery undertook the evaluation of the programme. Dr. Fiona Lynn, Fiona, you're very welcome, is a senior lecturer within the School of Nursing and Midwifery at the University in Belfast. She's also the Deputy Director of Campbell UK and Ireland. Fiona's work involves focusing on delivering. I was so focused on getting the presentation right. Fiona, bear with me. Fiona's work and research fundamentally looks at families antenatally right through to their early years and their childhood studies. Fiona has been involved in quite a number of RCTs, feasibility studies and reviews of services both here in Northern Ireland and globally. Fiona, you're very welcome, and thank you for your patience. I'll pass you over now to do the evaluation of the programme. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alison, and thanks for inviting me to participate in this day and present findings from this evaluation. So Alison has talked about the Tiny Start project that they have funded from the National Lottery Community Fund. So you've heard all about what the intervention was, and my role in it and the role of the evaluation team at Queen's University was to evaluate not just the Growing Child programme, but also Tiny Life expanded some of their services to deliver their services to more parents. So I'm going to discuss that then in the next 10 minutes. So the objectives of the Tiny Start evaluation was to examine the profile of parents accessing the Tiny Life family support services. So that included parent support groups, baby massage sessions, baby sensory sessions, and also the one-to-one home-based volunteers. And also then we wanted to evaluate the parent-reported outcomes for those receiving the Growing Child programme specifically. So the Tiny Life family support services go up to the infant being age 2, and the Growing Child programme was up to infant age 3 years. And we want to observe the trends across the 3-year timeline, that those 30, it was for the 3940 parents that took part in that. We also wanted to explore the parents' experiences of the Growing Child programme and the staff experiences as well, so those who were facilitating and or delivering the Growing Child programme. So what did we do and how did we do it? Well, we had 3 phases. The first phase was to examine the profile of parents accessing the services and their opinions of the services, and we used survey methods for that. These were voluntary survey evaluations that they could fill in at the end of parent support groups anonymously, and they just put them into a little a closed box at the end of those support sessions, or at the end of baby sensory class or baby massage class. Phase 2 then, it was evaluating the parent reported outcomes for those who received the Growing Child programme, and we used standardised questionnaires for that on parental self-efficacy, and we used the tool for measuring parental self-efficacy for that. Also social support, and we used the perinatal infant care social support questionnaire for that, and health-related quality of life. We used the Euroqual EQ5D. So all standardised, reliable, valid tools were used for that. And then in phase 3, we explored the parents and the staff experiences of receiving, facilitating or delivering the Growing Child programme. using semi-structured interviews. So that was a qualitative study. And on to the findings then. So in phase 1, we compared to Northern Ireland statistics on mothers giving birth to premature infants. The respondents to the survey evaluation, there were 343 of them. They were similar in terms of mean gestational age at birth and mean birth weight of infants. So it was good to know that Tiny Life were supporting parents who were similar to the Northern Ireland population of parents who have premature infants. But they had an older age profile. So there were mothers aged less than 24 years were underrepresented in this sample of 343 women. It's not to say that Tiny Life aren't supporting women who are younger in age or underrepresented in their services. It could be that those who were younger were less likely to complete the survey evaluation at the time. They were handed out at the end of sessions sporadically over the 5-year time frame of the Tiny Start project. In comparison to UK population norms, respondents reported on average lower health-related quality of life. And this is to be expected of this group, right? By UK population norms, we're talking about women aged between 19 and 45. Parents' opinions then of the services. We looked specifically at 2 types of support services that Tiny Life provided, and that was the parent support groups. And with this one, you can see the word cloud illustrating the parents' comments on those groups. They valued the support. It was unanimously positive, and they enjoyed the social aspect of meeting as a group. They appreciated the opportunity to ask advice from Tiny Life staff, exchanging tips and experiences with other parents. And they appreciated the welcoming, safe and friendly environment that they received. And in relation to the baby massage sessions then, evaluated very highly by parent respondents for the benefits of learning new techniques to help relax their baby and relieve their baby's reflux, constipation, colic and teething, and also encouraging parents to bond with their baby. On to phase 2 then. So this was looking at parents' self-reported outcomes for those parents that were participated in the Growing Child programme. These are the results from the TOPSI, from the Parental Self-Efficacy, which has 8 domains: emotion and affection, play and enjoyment, empathy and understanding, control, discipline and setting boundaries, pressures, self-acceptance, learning and knowledge. So the higher the score, the greater the parent's confidence in the parenting ability. And we found significant improvements in parental self-efficacy from enrolment up to the infant age 2 years. We found significantly lower scores in parental self-efficacy at infant age 3 years. And this is in large part due to a reduction in the parent's sense of control. So, for example, one of the items under the control domain in the TOPSI is I can remain calm when facing difficulties, and they score from 0 to 10 on that. So they had lower sense of control at the infant age 3 years. And it's interesting perhaps to note that, the Tiny Life services went up to the age of 2 years, and then after that they were receiving just the Growing Child programme alone. Parents' perception of poor child development, we also found, was associated with lower scores in parental self-efficacy across time. And that child development was measured through the Ages and Stages questionnaire. Trends then observed in social support. So we found no significant changes in the functional social support reported by parents from enrolment to infant age 2 years. It was only measured up to 2 years of age. It wasn't measured at 3 years, mainly because of the questionnaire. Parents involved in the Growing Child programme reported high levels of structural social support from enrolment through to the infant age 2 years from informal and formal sources. And this is probably as we expected, that The limitation of this study that we did is that we didn't have a control group. We didn't have a comparison group. All we can look is at the 39 individuals who participated and self-reported these outcomes over the 3-year timeline of the receipt of the Growing Child programme. So, you know, these additional social support, the scores were they were positive, and they were as expected because they were receiving support from the Life Start family visitor. Trends observed then in parents' health-related quality of life. So we found statistically significant improvements in their health-related quality of life from enrolment to the infant age 2 years. Significant but moderate reduction in parents' health-related quality of life by the infant age 3 years. So it dipped slightly between 2 and 3 years. And this was in large part due to an increase in parents reporting problems with anxiety and depression. So the EQ5D has 5 domains, and one of those domains is anxiety and depression, and that's what parents were scoring lower on when their infant was 3 years of age. We also found significant interaction observed between parents' health-related quality of life across time and their infant's gestational age at birth. So with lower scores of parents' quality of life associated with a lower gestational age at birth. Moving on to the qualitative phase of the evaluation, and we had 13 parents who took part in qualitative interviews. You can see the themes and sub-themes that emerged there in the diagram to the right. In relation to reasons for enrolling in the Growing Child programme, it was based on help in understanding the developmental needs of their child, and also the lack of support services available to them, including limited home visits from the health visitor. So those were their reasons for enrolling in the programme. In relation to parents' experiences of the Growing Child programme, they were consistently positive across the interviews. In relation to parents' reflections then as well, it was the duration and intensity was a positive thing for many parents. Maybe one or two thought that they didn't need it when their child's development had reached what was expected at their age. Then they felt that they didn't need it up to the 3 years, and others wished that it went on beyond 3 years, and also that it made a difference. They unanimously said that the programme made a difference for them. The themes were also echoed by the staff experiences. So there was a small number of staff members. It's good to hear from Alison an update in the fact that more Tiny Life family support officers are being trained in the Growing Child programme to deliver it. At the time, there were only a few members of staff who delivered the programme or facilitated it, and 3 took part in qualitative interviews. There was a good partnership working between Tiny Life and Life Start, with challenges managed easily. Successful delivery of the programme through tailoring the programme and adapting their approach to the needs of each family. That was very specifically the experience of the Life Start family visitors. Preparatory work prior to home visits was essential. Just before going into the family, reminding themselves of who the family was, their infant, previous visits, and any issues that had been previously raised by the mother or the father. Staff felt assured by the quality of the programme and the evidence base to it. It's an expert delivered evidence-based intervention, so they felt confident and comfortable in delivering it, knowing that it would make improvements to the parents and to the child. Key implications then. A key implication of this evaluation of the Tiny Start project and that unique partnership between Tiny Life and Life Start is the importance of the services in supporting families of premature infants and providing reassurance to parents. Implications for future decision making on service delivery. There's a recognised need for parents, additional support to care for their premature infant, understanding their child's development in the early years, help with their child's progress and development, and assistance with school readiness skills as well. Delivering Tiny Life Family Support Services in partnership with the Growing Child Programme would provide structured, tailored, holistic support for families in need. So the successful working relationship with staff and also the management buy-in suggests an integration of the Growing Child Programme into the suite of Tiny Life services would be successful, with long-term sustainability achieved. I think we've already heard that from Alison in relation to the additional Tiny Life Family Support Officers being trained in the programme. Findings suggest that Tiny Life should expand their services to infant age 3 years. So previously, whenever this was conducted, their services last until the infant was age 2, and support parents through to their child's transition into the school setting. Thank you. That's a list of the evaluation team and my email address, and the full report is available from the website there.
Fiona, for your presentation on the evaluation findings, which I'm sure the delegates in the audience will find very, very interesting, and has helped shape the direction of Tiny Life and the services that we deliver. I think it's important now that we hear the parents' perspective of their journey through Tiny Start. Claire and Graham Cordner were a family who undertook the Tiny Start programme. They have 2 premature sons, and it was initially when Connor was born prematurely that they decided, through their engagement with Tiny Life, that they would undertake the Tiny Start programme. So Bev, if you could show the video of Claire and Graham and their journey through Tiny Start. Thank you. And thank you to Claire and Graham, who could not be with us today, for sharing their very personal story. I spent quite a bit of time with them, and Connor, who is now in, I think it's P2 or P3 this year, is doing remarkably well, as is his younger brother. I want to take us on now to the next bit of our programme and introduce Professor Victoria Sims. Victoria is the Research Director for the School of Psychology at the University of Ulster since 2017 and was promoted to Reader in Psychology in 2018. She has a specific interest in the development of mathematics in developing children, and as a developmental psychologist, much of her work and research focuses on the cognitive and educational outcomes, with a particular emphasis on mathematics, as I've said, for preterm infants and the home environment within which they learn. Victoria has been published in too numerous publications and studies to mention today, but I'll pass you over to Victoria, who's going to take us through the next part of our programme in understanding children born prematurely. Thank you very much, Victoria.
Can I just check that you can see my screen and you can hear me okay?
We can indeed, Victoria, yes.
Yeah, perfect. As Alison said, I'm also a prof now, so that's a wee bit out of date, Alison. So I got promoted last year, but I'm a developmental psychologist by training, and I'm particularly interested in how children learn in school. And I want to talk to you a little bit more, kind of focusing in, I suppose, Professor Segal gave us a really beautiful overview of all of the amazing work that she has done and is renowned for doing in terms of long-term outcomes. But I really want to centre in and focus on educational outcomes. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about preterm birth and developmental outcomes. And then I want to talk to you about some of the work that we've been involved in, focusing on providing support for education. As Professor Segal earlier on really well outlined, I basically could put the first few slides of my presentation into the bin. We know that we've seen improved survival rates of children born very preterm and extremely preterm over the past 20 years. But what we also have seen is quite static neurodevelopmental outcomes. So we haven't really seen over that period of time. And we know that multiple areas of development, and that's why programs such as the one we've just seen before are really important, because they're holistic and they attempt to intervene on multiple issues that some of our premature born children may face. But as a psychologist, some of those specific issues that we are really interested in are neuropsychological issues. So we see as a group, not every child born very preterm will experience these issues, but we see as a group, children may have issues with executive functions. So these executive functions are based in the frontal lobe of our brain. And one of the really important executive functions is inhibitory control. And anyone who's worked with or has a 2 to 3-year-old will know that inhibitory control is absolutely shocking in children born at term and preterm as well. Trying to hold yourself back from saying something you really, really want to say, or trying to grab something that you know you're not allowed. We also have an executive function specifically called working memory. And that's about being able to hold things in your mind and manipulate it at the same time. And that you would be activating your working memory if I say to you right now to add 17 and 21 together. You've got those two numbers in your head. You might be making them into columns to do addition, and you're mapping through and manipulating through that information. And finally, another clear issue that some of our very preterm children may face are difficulties with visuospatial skills. And again, thinking of that example that I just gave you, trying to align information, trying to navigate through information are these visuospatial processing skills. And these have been really well documented in multiple samples across the globe. And what we know about these kind of cognition or executive function skills is that they underpin children and adults' behavior and emotions. And then these behavior and emotions feed into broader outcomes. So our cognition, executive functions, working memory, visuospatial processing underpin things like behavior such as being inattentive or being very anxious or being very having conduct problems. And then those things predict those broader outcomes such as educational attainment or employment opportunities or broader health-related outcomes as well, because we know one behavior is health-related behaviors and they predict healthy outcomes. So this kind of cascade of from cognition to behavior and emotions to broader outcomes is something that we are really interested in as a. What we also know is that there is a higher prevalence of special educational needs within our groups of very preterm children, with up to 2/3 of children requiring special educational needs support. And what is very profound is that we see increasing rates of special educational needs with decreasing gestational age. So you can see here in this graph along the y-axis is the proportion of children who have been given an educational statement. The x-axis is the gestational age in weeks. And what you can see here is at 24 weeks, around 50% of children are given special educational needs status. When we get up to 40 weeks, that's less than 0.05 of people are being given that diagnosis. So we're seeing this increased level of special educational needs status, and that is generally associated with decreasing gestational age. There's something interesting going on here in terms of law. More broadly, and actually Professor Segal's work has said that 53% of preterm children have been reported to have school problems, so just issues performing within the classroom, versus 13% of term children. And children born at term is really important, so we're seeing not only children going the full way to be getting a special educational needs statement, but also just teachers or parents reporting their children having heightened levels of difficulty in being able to engage within the classroom environment. We also see poor performance across all curriculum subjects, and that's both in standardized assessments that many of us may be very aware of in the Northern Irish setting in terms of 11+, for example, or the Key Stage 1 and 2 assessments, but also in terms of teacher-rated achievement. And what's been found by Veronique Pritchard in New Zealand is that these differences are actually observable in preschool and can persist the whole way through the school years. So, I'm giving quite a bleak picture, but I want to remind you that these are group level differences, and not all children who are born very preterm or extremely preterm will experience educational underachievement, but it's something that we have to be very critically aware of for this large group of children entering into our classrooms. As someone who's particularly interested in how children learn about mathematical thinking, we recognise that probably the most difficulties that are observed in children born very preterm is in the area of mathematics. And to try and find out why these difficulties we were being presented with these difficulties. One kind of hypothesis was that very preterm children had a quite specific learning difficulty, which would be described as developmental dyscalculia. And that's the equivalent of developmental dyslexia. So a very fundamental issue with being able to play with numbers and their number sense. However, when we went and systematically explored this with a large group of 8 to 10-year-old children born very preterm to their term classmates, we actually found that this was not the case. Our very preterm children were not, say, it's phenotypically developmental dyscalculia. And instead, our very preterm children were actually struggling with mathematics because of those general cognitive skills that I described earlier on, that actually very preterm children in our sample were struggling with mathematical learning because of their poor working memory and their poor visuospatial skills. And this is really, really kind of obvious when you think about it. If you're struggling with working memory, you're not going to be able to do those very sophisticated internal mental manipulations that you need to do to be able to do mathematics. And if you're struggling with your visuospatial skills, you're also going to struggle with that alignment that is really important in terms of doing more broad mathematical processing. Geometry is going to be incredibly difficult, as is algebra. What's really kind of fascinating is we were funded by Action Medical Research to follow these children up again when they were 12 to 14 years old. And this work comes under the kind of umbrella of PRISM, Premature Infant Skills in Mathematics study. What we found for our children who were born very preterm is displayed in this graph. And we have on the y-axis mathematics achievement. This is a standardized test. And on the x-axis, when the children were in primary or in secondary school. And what we can see here is that between primary and secondary school, our preterm born children improve in their mathematics skills in this standardized assessment, which is good. It's telling us that education is working. But we can see that there is a significant difference between our preterm born children and our term born children. Our term born children are consistently outperforming our preterm born children. And that difference between term-born children and preterm-born children in primary school and in secondary school is exactly the same size. The difference, and in terms of research, we would call that a large effect size. This is a profound difference between our two groups. I want to kind of take a little segue from what I've described to you around specifically in mathematics. And I want to also talk to you about a really beautiful piece of work that was completed last year by an amazing undergraduate student at Ulster University, Anna Forte. Anna really wanted to do a dissertation that she felt really reflected her. And Anna was also born at 28 weeks gestation. And what she wanted to do was to really understand her peers' experience of education. And what she did was a study using interpretive phenomenological analysis. That's really hard to say, but basically it's a qualitative approach to understand people's lived experience of a certain subject. And what she wanted to understand was that those young people's experience of their lived experience of going through the education system. And what she did was interview 5 females, 18 to 23 years old, and all born very preterm. And through the analysis that she conducted through those interviews, she was able to see that certain themes kind of really stood out in terms of these young people's experience. Now, let's caveat this by saying that all of these young people had made it to higher education. We're all undergraduate students. But I think what they had to say is really fundamentally important. First of all, one theme was around their cognitive skills related to education. This really qualitative work reflects precisely what I've just described from our PRISM study data. For example, Lucy says that memory was really difficult. She would work with her mother around spellings. She would do one. She would work for 3 minutes on one, get to the 10th spelling. She would go back to the first one and everything was gone already. And she has very, very clear memories of her mother sitting with her for hours and hours and hours trying to drum in these spellings. But because of her work, really incredibly difficult for her to be able to get through the hoops of learning spellings for class tests. The second theme was around educational anxiety. Lucy also describes about saying about if she hadn't have been born early, would she have done better in school? She always had this thought at the back of her mind. Her anxiety was played out in terms of self-doubt. She was never satisfied in terms of what she did. And this was consistent across the participants within this study. Another theme was around social anxiety, and so describes being a really anxious person, getting home from school and feeling absolutely exhausted because of the level of social anxiety that she had to overcome within the classroom, being emotionally drained. And Caitlin describes getting to university and suddenly realizing that she's had to get over these social anxieties, and knowing then actually in her position, being at university was easier than for some of her peers, because she'd already had to overcome that social anxiety and maybe some poor social skills in primary and secondary school, and having confidence then when she reaches university, because she's already had to do it before. The fourth theme was around parent-child relationships and parental relationships, and aspirations, that I should say. And really our young people reflected that their parents were incredibly supportive, never pushy, but supportive, and wanting to understand where their child wanted to go, being sensitive parents to be able to support their children in the pathways they chose to take. I haven't put the quote up here, but another kind of indicator of this was also that parent-child relationship being affected by the extreme trauma in the birth of their baby. And all of our young adults talked about some of the things that their parents said around being scared to touch them at birth, being incredibly worried about their health, and therefore that kind of echoing through their relationship throughout development. And finally, there was a kind of theme that we've called consequences of preterm birth, but I think reflecting back on what Professor Segal said, it could be and Caitlin really very beautifully, being able to say to people, yes, I was born at 27 weeks. Look at where I've come to, look at how I've been able to develop, look at my achievements, and a really kind of positive slant on being someone who is an ex-preterm baby and a fully grown adult now studying at university. I think the work that Anna has done is really very profound, and it really reflects the quantitative data that we know about social anxiety, about educational anxiety, and also about educational underachievement. And this qualitative work is very important because it allows our young people to have a clear voice in terms of how they think education should change to support them. One of the final things I thought was very clear from all of the interviews that were conducted was there seemed to be a step change in terms of social anxiety and educational anxiety from primary into the secondary system, where the secondary system was a little bit more flexible. They were choosing subjects that were more favorable to themselves, and they felt that sometimes they just met a teacher that had the diversity of teachers that just got them. And that experience of being able to choose subjects aligned to teachers that you really got on with seemed to be something that was really important to boost that educational self-esteem. So as a group, as a prison study research group, we are really, really focused on intervention and trying to improve the outcomes of our children and young people born very preterm. And I want to move on just to talk very briefly, we're kind of running out of time and we're a little bit over time, about some of the work that we've been doing. I just want to kind of look at these data provided by this small thing, which is a kind of life equivalent in England. And parents reported in a survey that they conducted, 84% felt that awareness of the longer term needs of premature babies is needed. And I think that that's really important because it dovetails into some of the kind of quantitative work that's been done by Samantha Johnson at the University of Leicester. And she has conducted a really large scale survey of teachers and educational psychologists, what they know about very preterm birth and the potential impacts on education. And you can see here in the left-hand side of this graph that only 15% of teachers had said that they had received any training in terms of what very preterm birth might mean for educational outcomes of very preterm children. And actually, I think quite troubling as well, only 40% of educational psychologists had received that type of training. So this is a serious gap in education of the education of our educational practitioners. In the same study, Sam also reports that educational psychologists and teachers are overwhelmingly crying out to know more about this group of children, strategies to help them support children in the classroom. So what do we do and what do we develop? Well, we had a body of research from our own PRISM study work, but also from the broader work that Sam Johnson has conducted and led with Neil Marlowe as well, who's been mentioned today. And by reviewing literature of existing research from across the globe, we knew that there were this kind of combination of difficulties that very preterm children would face. And we took that information and we used a co-production method where we worked with parents of very preterm children, young adults who were born very preterm, teachers, educational psychologists and classroom assistants to work together to develop a resource that we thought would maybe benefit those educational practitioners. And we came up with this pretermbirth.info website, which consists of models of learning. It takes about 1 hour to go through, and it kind of covers all the things that we felt, or that participating research group felt, were important for educational professionals to know. What is preterm birth? Educational outcomes following preterm birth, cognitive and motor development following preterm birth, behavioral, social and emotional outcomes. And in this piece, very an amazing little snapshot of a mother talking about their child's social development. And then how can educational professionals support preterm children? And this has changed the classroom. We can prepare schools for children who are born very preterm. And we have a support strategy. We kind of don't necessarily use the language school readiness reflected in our children themselves, but we're schools ready for children who are born very preterm for them to enter into that system. This is a free resource and openly available to anyone who wants to use it. We ran a very small trial. This is not our best science in the world, but what we ran was a very small trial with primary school educators, 61 of them. And what we can see here in this graph is this is the y-axis describes how the percentage of people who agree or strongly agree with the statements on the x-axis, and we see significant increases in people these educational practitioners feeling adequately equipped to support the learning of children born preterm, confident in supporting the learning of children born preterm, receiving sufficient training, as you can see, 0 at baseline to post-test, when they were saying about 75% of them are saying, I feel that I've got good training. And then also knowing what to do, going from 20% pre-test to around 80% post-test, really boosting our educational practitioners' knowledge, but also their skills. And importantly, the greatest amount of increase were in the areas very preterm children are most likely to face difficulties. So we saw greatest amount of change in terms of understanding about mathematical difficulties, poor social skills, inattentiveness, so staring out of the window rather than being hyperactive, and poor visuospatial skills. So we're seeing a boost in learning in the areas that we know very preterm children will face. Also importantly, the teachers that were engaged in this study really just enjoyed using the resource. They found it something easy level, and they found that it was really interactive because quizzes built in, and there were opportunities to download resources that you could stick on the wall, etc. We launched it in May 2019, open and free, after we'd ran the evaluation, and we had a huge dissemination plan through multiple outlets. And within the resource, the only thing that we asked of people was that they would fill in a little pop-up box so that we could understand why people were using the resource and who they were. So the best estimates with caveats is that 19,000 forms have been generated by September 2022. Now, there's lots of bots about on the internet, so we have to really kind of have that with a caveat because we're not 100% sure. Google Analytics says we've had 38,000 users. We've got responses in about 40% of those little forms that have been generated. 2/3 of our users are educational professionals and 1/5 are parents. And we know that the resource has been used in approximately 80 countries. So we've had incredibly wide reach across the globe, but we've also had reach of the people who we wanted, the educational professionals, and also parents. And what we've seen is that educational professionals used the resource and really used it. And parents have also used this as kind of an advocacy tool to their schools. They've taken it along to schools to say, we should really use this within my child's school to really when they enter into the classroom. The smallest things picked up on this training resource and embedded that in their Prem-aware school kite mark. This was launched in October 2020. And this award can be can be won, I suppose, be awarded by schools taking on a series of things. One is around awareness raising, so the teachers must engage in the PRISM study preterm birth.info training package. They put up some posters to talk about what prematurity might look like. They ask about children's birth history at school entry, and also they give feedback and maturity that may face in the classroom. This is really exciting because now there are 27 schools that are Prem aware, mainly in England. And I'm delighted to say that the Department for Education in Northern Ireland, through the campaigning of Tiny Life, have given funding to help support that rollout in Northern Ireland as well. So we're really excited to see this happening and being given support by someone who can support schools to take on this information. It's not lots of hard work, but we believe by ensuring that schools change the environment, that will help not only the children, also children who may be struggling for other reasons in the classroom. I finally just want to finish by just saying that obviously I've really focused on work in primary school years. We're really being focused on children who are in school already. But what we know from huge amounts of developmental psychology literature is differences in outcomes are observed at the earliest stages. And that's really important when we to the work of the intervention work that Tiny Life have been doing in Northern Ireland and being evaluated by Queen's University. A little figure from a really interesting and important longitudinal study in the USA. And what we see here is that children in the purple line who are performing the poorest at school entry at 54 months stay behind their peers the whole way through their age, the whole way through development up to age 15 years old. And for us as a research team, it's really important that we are understanding why these developmental differences are occurring before children enter into the school system. The data here is not about prematurity, it's about levels. So we're trying to understand that in terms of children who are born at term, but also in terms of children born very preterm as well. And currently we have an ongoing study at Ulster University looking at home learning and the interactions that parents have with their children in the home. And this is a Zoom who was born very preterm between the age of 3 and 5. We would really love to be able for you to engage with our study. It's really simple and straightforward and just requires you to have a laptop or a phone that you can engage in the process with us. So the QR code is there, and Colette Duncan is really spearheading this work and she's doing an amazing job. It just needs a few more participants to finish off this piece of research to help us understand the home learning environment for very preterm children. So I just want to thank all the people who are involved in the PRISM study. You can see all their beautiful shiny faces. This is a huge amount of work. We need to thank Action Medical Research because they not only funded the work that we did assessing children on a one-to-one basis and then following them up when they were adolescents, but they also importantly funded the development of that PRISM resource. That costs quite a lot of money, but is being made freely accessible to all of those people that we've just talked about earlier on. And we are getting that feedback from parents and teachers to say that it's changing their practice. Their children are being responded to in the classroom. So thank you.
Professor Sims, that was an absolutely outstanding presentation covering and tagging on to what went before in terms of what we need to do in terms of longer term outcomes for our premature babies beyond the NICU, as we've said, in their early years, but more importantly in school as well. And as you rightly said, we're delighted to be able to bring the PRISM and the Prem Award here to schools in Northern Ireland. It's another stage and step in the journey of understanding that prematurity is for life almost, not just for the NICU, but I'm sure there'll be some interesting questions. Can I invite Dr. Fiona Lynn back onto the stage and Dr. Pauline McClellan, if Bev, our tech expert, is able to bring her on. We'll take a few questions before we let everyone go off on a very much needed comfort break, before we go into the final bit, which is looking at young adults and their experience of prematurity, and reflecting back. And I think some of the speakers have already confirmed it. I'm not sure if Pauline can join us. Hopefully she can. But Victoria, I'm going to ask Garrett Keating. Pauline is here with us. Has just asked a question. Do you have any data or experiences seeing significant differences in the development amongst preterm siblings, i.e. twins, triplets, etc.? Is there a difference there that you're seeing in the studies?
So within our studies, we don't actually include we don't have twin pairs within our studies. So I don't know that from kind of personal experience. But so I can't question. I'm sorry.
No problem. Thank you. And quickly on some of the questions to do with the Tiny Start and the rolling out of it, and then come back to Fiona, etc. So for those of you who are working within Northern Ireland, Amy, a health visitor in the Southern Trust and others, and for any babies who are born in Dublin but are originally from Northern Ireland, they will be able to access all of Tiny Life services. And as I've said, we have just received a grant from DE, and we'll be rolling out the Growing Child programme across Northern Ireland to 120 families per year. If anyone is interested, please email Tiny Life, and we'll talk to you about the specific details of what you're actually looking for. Pauline, poor connection. I'll answer one of the other questions and maybe then come back to Pauline. This is an excellent, Jackie Quigg said this is an excellent programme. Is there any plans to expand the Tiny Start programme beyond infants born under 32 weeks or having a low birth weight? I think we have to start somewhere. That is our plan, but we are looking to how we can expand it. We're including twins and multiples, babies who have been cooled, and we may take other children into that cohort as we deliver the programme, Jackie. It would be brilliant to deliver to all premature babies, but unfortunately capacity is not there at the moment. Yes, to a baby, if a baby is born in Dublin and they live in Northern Ireland, they can access Tiny Life services. Someone, Hella Watson asked, does the programme provide OT, speech and language and physio? The answer is no. This is a programme that complements those allied health professional services that many premature babies will continue to need. This is very much a parent education programme and supporting parents to carry out everyday tasks that support their social, emotional, cognitive, their fine and gross motor skills. And we have seen, as Fiona said, really positive outcomes in all of that. Fiona, do you want to say anything in terms of the developmental outcomes with regards to maybe even anecdotally what parents said around what they saw in their children developmentally?
Yeah, I think it was the parents' understanding of their child's development then that was really came out from the interviews, and then also from the questionnaires as well. That you know, that ages and stages questionnaire, a lot of parents are familiar with filling it in. They may fill it in as part of that integrated review at preschool setting with the health named preschool settings health visitor and the teacher, and they were able to fill it in well, and then also then understanding their child's development much better as a result of having those monthly visits with the Life Start family visitor. And you know, in relation to the ages and stages questionnaire, we weren't analysing improvements in the child's development, but more in relation to the parents' understanding of it, their perceptions of it, and their perceptions of their child's development, which was good.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you for joining us. There is a question around the potential to roll it out beyond Northern Ireland, and maybe you'd like to say a little bit more about the Growing Child, that it isn't just a Northern Ireland or a Tiny Life project.
First of all, can I apologize that kept me from presenting this morning, and I'm very grateful for Alison for stepping in, and thank you so much. Yes, we do deliver the Growing Child programme, home visiting of Ireland in a number of areas. It's available county-wide in Donegal, Sligo, Leitrim, West Cavan, Monaghan, Drogheda, and in parts of Dublin, in Tala especially. But again, it's a question of resources, you know, where we have the resources and an organisation that takes out a franchise, we can deliver. So really, if people are living in the Republic in an area where LifeStart isn't available and they're anxious, maybe they could just get in touch with me. So my email address is pauline@lifestartfoundation.org. And can I say that I think over the whole of this morning, so many of the themes that have come out of this conference event around, you know, about parents' anxiety and the trauma they experience and how that can be passed on to the child. And these are all so important in terms of child's early development. And that it's a wonderful event to be at this. And I'm very grateful, Alison, for being invited. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm just checking if we have any other questions that we may have missed. I think people are connecting through the chat and the QA where there are personal individual questions around access to services, both locally here in Northern Ireland and much broader. And thank you for those that are picking up and responding to those, and maybe not a conversation for now. I should actually say from Professor Sims as well, giving us a plug, we will be launching our schools project next week. And we are looking for, for schools who are interested in having heard Vic talk about her excellent program in the prison training, of getting involved, because she's going to do some evaluation of that. So to help us learn more in it as well. If there are no further questions, can I thank each of you for your contribution to this session of the programme. As Pauline said, there's been a really good flow and a build on around each of the speakers and the themes that are coming out. For our delegates, it is 12 o'clock. We are running probably 10 minutes late at the moment, but if you'd like to take a quick 10-minute comfort break and come back on at 12:10, we may be about 5 or 10 minutes finishing the conference today. So thank you for your patience. Thank you, everyone.